Congressman Joe Sestak is he's a member of two of the health subcommittees that helped pass the public option bill out of the Education Labor Committee. He's also a former Rear Admiral, which is kind of interesting because we have this horrible situation at Fort Hood today. Three-star Navy Admiral, by the way, highest-ranking veteran ever elected to Congress, and running in the primary in Pennsylvania against Senator Arlen Spector, who was a Republican, Democrat. I don't know. It depends on what day of the week it is, I suppose. Nice to meet you, Congressman Joe Sestak.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on.
I watch you all the time. I think you're awesome. I think you're really intelligent and very, very, you're also on Veterans Affairs, Armed Services. So, I always watch you for, information about our personnel because I'm ex-personnel and, kills me when they say, "Oh, we support the troops." And I'm watching this thing. I don't know if you're watching at Fort Hood today,
right?
And they suspect it's the guys were in uniform. They don't know if they were really military or in person. And I just think, oh God, if this is due to overdeployment, if this is due to stress on the family, if this is due to post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury. How dare they say that they're supporting, us after we return home and we're not in our clean, shiny uniforms, but now we're a little dusty and dirty and broken.
Right. First off, as yours heart does, goes out to the families of the service members that we have lost or have been harmed in this incident. Second, we don't know exactly who did it. All that said, we do know that about 30% of our troops come home from Iraq and Afghanistan with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we also know that there are efforts that try to address it. As a matter of fact, the commander of Fort Hood recently was mandating it would take his personal approval before anyone could work on a weekend. And he wanted everyone home for dinner by 6 o'clock, he said last June. All that said, we are still inadequate in trying to address this issue. You said it so well. I hear time and again, take care of the troops. But that often means more money for defense. No, taking care of our troops is making sure before they deploy, as some amendments that I put in the defense authorization bill, there is counseling, there is some sort of prevention in this, not just for them but their families. And when they come home, we take even more seriously the increase in suicide rate and other types of indications that we aren't yet addressing this most serious of injuries, mental challenges.
Well, I know you were on the ground in Afghanistan. I also know you were in the Pentagon on 9/11, and so you know what trauma can do to a person. And we don't take care of anybody. It's like once you serve, thanks, wham bam, thank you, man, you're on your own. It just, it happened to me. Reagan was my commander in chief. That's how old I am. But I came home, and when I first went in, they promised a GI Bill, they promised education. That's why I did. And by the time I got out, it was like, oh no, you don't get anything, and you're on your own. And quite frankly, you can't integrate so easily, and now, of course, I never saw combat. I can't imagine the stress.
But you were ready to serve over there in combat if called upon. So first, thanks for your service, and I mean that, because you know as well as I do, there isn't a greater brotherhood or sisterhood than having served as a veteran, and I was very fortunate to do it for a few decades. That said, I think that your point is so well taken in this type of conflict. Our soldiers and Marines in Iraq or Afghanistan go what we call outside the wire, as you know, every day, for 7 days a week into a combat-like situation, not knowing if the car in Iraq is going to blow up beside them, not knowing if a roadside bomb or a Taliban sniper is going to shoot in Afghanistan. Then they come home for 12 months, go back for another 15. It's a little different than, say, World War II, which was a horrible war, but needed for our defense. But there, the average number of days of combat a soldier did was 180, and there was rest time in between. The unremitting pressure psychologically on our soldiers is more trauma than most generations have ever seen, and that's why we aren't doing it quite right. Yes, we have a new GI Bill we passed, but it's taking too long to ramp it up, as we saw in August and September, as I wrote letters to General Sestak, head of the VA. And we must do so much more in post-traumatic disorder. But second, we have to help them get the jobs in this recession that they're coming home in. And most importantly, that's probably one of the keys.
I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. The idea that they come back and nobody knows, who they are, what they've done. Nobody can point to their war on a map, and there's no job. There's nothing waiting for them. They can't support their family. They can't. They can't. It's just untenable. It's got to change. It's got to stop. So. Let me ask you, just to shift gears here, are you enjoying the Republican Renaissance?
Oh, I have to tell you something. And if I can shift that comment to my own race for the U.S. Senate
Sure.
over here, my take on this is that here we have somebody who has shifted his party. And in a sense, if there's anything we don't need is someone that's in it for their jobs. What I find now, unfortunately, down in Washington, D.C., is people seem to be in it for opposition. Can we stop something from occurring? And in my mind, that is the most damaging thing to America. If there's any time we needed truly to stand up and be counted for what's right for America, I'd like to take the public option. That is finally going to break the stranglehold of a monopoly that the insurance industry has on dictating prices. It's now. And if there's ever a time, and I just finished, I had 4 meetings with those groups that came to Washington today. They were, teabaggers, call them whatever you want. I met with them because I want them to understand why I believe this is the right thing to do. But if there's ever a time to stand up and be tall about what you believe in, that is common enterprise as well as an alliance with rugged individualism in America, this is it.
Well, how far did you get with them? I mean, they're running around saying, don't take away my health care. The irony is, I'm quite sure a few of them didn't have health care. And, frankly, the whites of their eyes comment by Ms. Bachmann was very offensive, and especially on the heels of today's hideous news. This is not the kind of instruction you want to be giving people who have a bad tendency to show up to rallies armed. You know what I mean? I watched your colleague Alan Grayson last night read the names of the dead, and I watched your other colleague Phil Gingrey try to take down his words. And I remember Gene Schmidt calling, Murtha a coward, a Marine, a coward. And yes, that's a reason to take down words. They had no reason to take down Grayson's words. And in fact, they backed off. But you have Michelle Bachmann able to say, go through the halls and scare members of Congress, scare them, and wait for the whites of their eyes. I mean, really, what is this incendiary language all about?
We can't have it. And we can't have it on either side. We have to stop it. And why? What I found out, and 2 of my meetings were outside because they were, as I was walking, I just was stopped by a group who knew me. But 2 of the meetings were in my office. And in both meetings, I found that when I was done, a smaller group would stay behind. The others might get frustrated at my answers of why I'm for this health care bill. But I found that those who stayed behind, although they were still very uncertain, that sometimes when you heard the logic of why this bill is an absolute economic requirement as well as morally the right thing to do, I feel as though they were more understandably, because government has let them down so much, particularly the last 8 years, with Iraq and post-Katrina, that they were worried into it by others, by misreference information. A lot of these people, I really believe, are good Americans. It's just my job to make sure you work through the diatribes, and that's why I wish we wouldn't have those types of statements that you mentioned. And then you can get to the most of them and say, no, you may disagree, but let me walk you through the logic of why this makes sense. And all of a sudden there's a little doubt in their mind that what they've been hearing is not correct.
Well, what did you tell them? I mean, I try very hard to explain that the healthcare reform is probably the single best thing we could do for the deficit. And I show them 8 ways to Sunday, how this helps us pay down the deficit. And if we don't do something about it, instead of spending 1 out of every $5 on healthcare, in 10, 20 years, we'll be spending 1 out of every $3 on healthcare. And people won't have healthcare to boot. So how do you explain it?
See, Randy, I think your use of facts is very helpful. What I use 3 or 4. I say, first of all, did you know right now you're paying for the uninsured? A family of 4 pays $1,100 more in your private health care plans because the uninsured go into an emergency room and the hospital doesn't need it. They pass it to an insurance company that passes it on to your premiums. I said, so in a sense, if we cover them early and get the cancer early, breast cancer, for example, we will not have to pay as much and they'll live longer. Number two, what I tell them is, wait a moment, in the Philadelphia region alone of Pennsylvania, because most of them were from that area today, 42% of Pennsylvanians live in the metropolitan area. One company has 70% of all the private health care plans. It's a monopoly, and you are being dictated a price. We just want some fair competition. We don't want to destroy the marketplace. We just want some fair competition. Maybe we misnamed it. Maybe we should have called it Blue Cross Blue Shield Junior or the consumer option instead of public option. The point is, it's just to affect fair competition, because if you have health care today, 14,000 Americans are losing it because premiums are skyrocketing. We want to slow that down. So walking them through those facts doesn't win them over necessarily, but it begins to put a pause into them. And I'm not always successful. Don't let me overplay it. But look, it's what America's about. As Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, but it's better than any other.
It really is.
We just have to work our way through it. I think, though, that eventually over time, the results of what we're doing, like you well said, are going to have such an impact on our economy, not just on our deficit, where we're going to save billions according to Congressional Budget Office, but it's also going to stop the $250 billion a year we lose in productivity of our GDP.
Yeah. Look, the idea that, not just that you're paying for somebody else's health care, because they'll start with the illegal stuff, and all that. But I just explain that we, the way I just say we spend 50% more on health care than the next nation that gets, all its people covered. And we don't get all our people covered for that 50% extra that we pay. It's it's a ridiculous, a way to run a country. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes, and we all suffer for it. I mean, look, that person who's uninsured, not only are we paying for them when they go to an emergency room, but then even our national security is affected, because our economic security is less, as we have less healthy workers, more absentee times that they're there. And then even in our military, less healthy, productive kids. Only 23% of the youth who graduate from high school today qualify under the exams, health exams and physical exams for the military.
Really? I
yes.
didn't know that.
And so what you're seeing here is, that's why I say that really what has to be better articulated is, look, we believe in rugged individualism. We've got that. And we like efficient government and deficit and budget. What we also believe is an alliance on a common enterprise that, you have to reach across and work together like this healthcare public option is intended to do, so that we all benefit. And the problem is, we're doing this in the midst of a savage recession that the previous 8 years placed us in. And it's frankly why I'm running for the U.S. Senate. How dare we reward somebody who is part of that GOP leadership, ran us aground as captain of the ship, and then wants to transfer to another ship and lead the way forward.
Well, the captain of the ship seems to be Captain Bachman Queeg. So, I would hope she would work on proving who stole the strawberries instead of telling people to go and scare Congress members. But, this is what we have. Oh, man. Well, listen, the public option, which one were you supportive of, the negotiated or the Medicare Plus 5?
Well,
which was your preference?
I voted for the Medicare Plus 5 for a few years in my committee, but I'm very supportive, and I wanted to eventually over the years go to the negotiated one, which is where we are, and I'm very content with that, and I'll tell you why.
I am too,
Pardon me?
I am too.
It takes out the legs underneath those that say, well, wait a minute, it's going to put out of business the insurance companies. No, it's not. It's just not going to pay $70 million severance pays to a CEO, $23 million salaries, high advertising costs, and, oh, by the way, it's got to compete in the market at negotiated prices. And it's got to compete, and it's a choice. And if it doesn't do well, it's not going to survive. But all of a sudden, you've got a competitor. When insurance companies want the 40 million uninsured Americans, but they don't want a competitor, darn well that they're not going to be put out of business. They just don't want to see their profits come down. One company of the two companies that have 70% of all Pennsylvanians' health insurance companies has a $3.5 billion reserve. What are we doing here?
I agree. Can I ask you if we'll get the 85% has to be spent on healthcare thing? Where the restrictions on the insurance companies to prevent them from increasing the premiums without just cause. and they have to prove that at least 85% of my premium went for my health care?
Yes, that is still we finished last night about 10, and that, as I remember, is still in the bill. I mean, my staff continued to about 30, and finally this morning I told them that I was supportive of the bill. What we don't want, is exactly how they are, how much goes this way, how much goes that way. This is intended to make this be one where people are rewarded for the quality of care, not the quantity of income they get by numbers of visits, etc. So that is still there. And, people have to also remember why we're doing this is so that everybody has the same level of benefits Congress members have access to. And it's not that we want them to have this type of level. I still stay with my military TRICARE. You remember that.
Yeah.
But we want them to be able to be productive members. And it's why we say, wait a minute, you large corporations, you're not going to be able to kick out your people or you're going to pay a fine. Because we want everyone covered, because the common enterprise of the United States of America has to compete with China. And I can tell you from the military, and you know this, that the dividends we got back in the military from having everybody, including family members, covered was tremendous. And that's what we're doing here, healthy, productive workers.
One last question. Did we reach an agreement on language for banning federal funds for abortion? Are we there?
Yes, I think we are. There is an Ellsworth amendment that's going to tighten up the language a little bit, but what it says is very simple, which is, look, if you choose to be in a plan and that provides an abortion, and by the way, it's a choice to be in that plan, whichever one it is. It could be for any private plan that's provided in this new health insurance market. But if you select that, your premiums are going to be divided between government, whatever the government pays and whatever you pay if you're subsidized, because we'll pay up to 400% of poverty level for those that can't afford it to make sure they're covered. But that money from the government is going to be divided out from any money that goes towards an abortion, and that will be paid strictly by the money of the private individual. That is their choice to have
right.
it.
That makes sense. The example I use all the time is if I had a Pell Grant and I chose a Catholic college, is that government money going to religious education? No, it's my choice, right?
Absolutely. Great example. Do you mind if I steal that?
Please do. Listen, Rear Admiral Congressman Joe Sestak, it's a pleasure to meet you, an honor to talk to you. I'm sorry about the Phillies. I am a New Yorker. I know. Ouch. I'm sorry. I just wanted to,
It was an ouch, and we all know it. It was a great series and all.
It was.
Can I say thanks for your service? I'll tell you.
Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you. I was in the Air Force, and it was, it was a great time for me. I really loved every second of it. But you really did the stuff. You did the hard stuff. So,
we all did.
I appreciate you so very much. And good luck, and I will be with you in this primary all the way. All the way.
And I'd love to come back when you have a chance.
Anytime. You're more than welcome. Anytime. You just give us a call or we'll call you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.